The responsibility of seeing clearly. Welcome back, Reasonauts. Hey guys, my name isn't important. The message is, every day is awesome. We just have to get through it. And before we begin, if these conversations resonate with you, subscribe and stay with us each week. Share this episode with someone who may need it, and join us on Facebook. Not for noise, not for attention, just a place where people learning to grow do not have to do it alone. Last week, we talked about the distance between what we say we believe and what our lives consistently reveal. We talked about faith, not as a label, and not as something owned by one religion, but as the power that allows belief to become movement. Because whatever we truly believe eventually becomes visible in how we live, how we treat people, how we handle power, how we behave when nobody is watching. Our lives become the testimony. But once you begin living in alignment with what you see as true, another question appears. What responsibility comes with seeing clearly? Because awareness can feel like a gift. It can help you recognize patterns, notice distortion, sense the cost inside a room, understand what is happening beneath what is being said. But clarity can also feel heavy. Once you see something, you cannot always return to not seeing it. And when you recognize what others may not recognize yet, you may begin wondering, am I responsible for telling them, correcting them, protecting them, saving them, carrying them? Or is there another way to carry awareness? A way that does not make you superior, controlling, exhausted, or hard. Today we are talking about the responsibility of seeing clearly, not the responsibility to control everyone. The responsibility to move responsibly with what you see. There are moments when awareness changes you, not because the outside world suddenly changed. The same people are there, the same routines, the same conversations, the same explanations everyone has always used. But something inside you finally recognizes what had been there the whole time. A pattern in a relationship. A repeated manipulation disguised as concern. A habit you kept excusing because admitting it would require change. A workplace that survives by exhausting good people and calling it dedication. A family dynamic built around one person's anger, where everyone else learns to become smaller so the room can remain calm. A belief that sounds loving but repeatedly produces fear. Once you see the pattern, the room looks different. The conversation sounds different. Words you once accepted begin carrying another meaning. Silence that once felt peaceful starts feeling like avoidance. Kindness that once looked generous starts revealing obligation. The same behavior carries a different weight, not because the behavior changed, because your relationship to it changed. And sometimes you wish you could go back. Back before you noticed. Back before the pieces connected. Back when the explanation was still enough. Not because ignorance was better, because awareness asks something of you. It creates responsibility. Before you recognize the pattern, you could participate without fully knowing what you were helping continue. You could laugh it off, make excuses, call it normal. Tell yourself that everyone deals with this. But after you recognize it, your movement becomes a choice. Staying becomes a choice. Silence becomes a choice. Participation becomes a choice. Even looking away becomes a choice. That can feel uncomfortable, because clarity removes some of the excuses that confusion once provided. You cannot always say, I didn't know. You may not know everything. You may still misunderstand parts of what you see. Awareness does not make you all-knowing. It does not make every conclusion automatically correct. But something has become clear enough that continuing exactly as before would require you to ignore yourself, to silence the signal, to participate against your own recognition. And that is where responsibility begins. Not when you know everything, not when every question has been answered, not when the whole room agrees with what you see. Responsibility begins when you know enough that your next movement can no longer remain unconscious. Because once awareness reveals the pattern, you may still need time to understand it, time to decide, time to prepare, time to find the cleanest movement available. But you cannot completely return to not seeing. That door has closed. And maybe that is the difficult gift of clarity. It does not always tell you what to do immediately, but it makes it harder to keep pretending that nothing needs to change. Clarity can quietly become ego. It happens easily. You notice a pattern someone else does not see. You understand the consequence before they do. You recognize manipulation, contradiction, fear. You see the trap. And for a moment, awareness can feel like elevation. You begin thinking, how can they not see this? Why are they still doing that? I already understand this. I'm further along. That is where awareness has to check itself, because seeing something another person does not see does not make you better. It means that in this moment, from your position and through your experience, you can recognize something they may not be able or ready to recognize. That is all. There are also things they can see that you cannot. There are patterns you are still standing inside, distortions you still defend, habits you still excuse, reactions you still call truth. Every person has blind spots. Every person has places where self-protection still looks like wisdom. Awareness should make us humble before it makes us confident. Because seeing clearly in one area does not mean you see clearly everywhere. You may understand the relationship pattern and still misunderstand yourself. You may recognize control in someone else while defending it inside your own behavior. You may see another person's fear while remaining unaware of the fear driving your response. That is why clarity has to stay teachable. The moment awareness becomes superiority, clarity begins distorting itself. Now you are no longer seeing the other person. You are seeing a lower position to stand above. You stop asking, what am I responsible for here? And begin asking, how do I prove that I understand more? That is not stewardship. That is hierarchy wearing the language of awareness. And hierarchy can become addictive. It can make a person feel advanced without requiring them to become responsible. But soft strength does not need to announce that it sees more. It does not need to correct every room. It does not need to turn awareness into identity. It simply moves more responsibly with what it can see, more carefully, more honestly, more humbly. Because the purpose of seeing clearly was never to rise above people. It was to reduce harm, to choose cleaner movement, to recognize distortion without becoming distorted by it. And sometimes the clearest sign that awareness is real is not that you speak with more certainty. It is that you carry what you see with more humility. Some people carry awareness like a backpack they never take off. It follows them into every conversation, every gathering, every workplace, every family dinner. They walk into a room and immediately feel the tension. Who is uncomfortable? Who is pretending? Who is dominating? Who has gone quiet? Who is about to react? They notice everything, every shift in tone, every unfinished sentence, every look across the table, every sigh everyone else ignored, every sentence that sounded harmless but landed heavily on someone else. And because they notice it, they begin believing they are responsible for it, responsible for calming the room, responsible for protecting everyone, responsible for preventing conflict, responsible for explaining what people meant, responsible for making sure nobody feels left out, responsible for carrying the emotional weight no one else seems willing to acknowledge, responsible for cleaning up what someone else broke. This often looks like compassion. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a beautiful expression of care. But sometimes it is an old survival pattern wearing compassionate clothing. Because many people did not learn to read the room as a hobby. They learned it because reading the room kept them safe. They learned to recognize anger before it exploded, to hear tension before voices became louder, to notice moods before punishment arrived. They learned to soften their voice, change the subject, distract, comfort, fix, disappear, become useful, become invisible, become whatever kept the environment stable enough to survive. Over time, that ability became remarkable. They became skilled at seeing what was coming, but somewhere along the way they confused recognition with responsibility. Seeing danger and being responsible for everyone's response to it are not the same thing. Seeing pain and being required to carry it are not the same thing. Understanding someone and becoming responsible for every decision they make are not the same thing. Awareness may tell you what is happening. It does not automatically assign you ownership of the entire room. That distinction changes everything. Because you can recognize tension without absorbing it. You can see pain without becoming its container. You can understand someone without rescuing them from every consequence. You can care deeply without carrying what was never yours to hold. And perhaps that is one of the hardest lessons for aware people to learn. Your ability to notice is a gift, but it is not a contract to manage everyone else's life. Sometimes the most responsible movement is not fixing the room. It is remaining honest inside the room, offering what is yours to offer, and leaving what belongs to someone else in their hands. That distinction is not cold. It is not indifference. It is not abandoning people. It is stewardship. Because when you stop trying to carry the whole room, you finally have enough strength to carry what is actually yours. When you discover something that changed your life, you naturally want to share it. A new perspective, a healthier boundary, a truth that released you, a pattern you finally understood, a habit you finally broke, a burden you finally set down. You think, if they could only see this, they would stop suffering. If someone had shown me sooner, I could have avoided so much pain. So you explain, then explain again. You choose better words, better examples. You search for the perfect analogy. You become more patient, more detailed, more urgent. You think, maybe I just haven't explained it well enough. But the other person still does not move. The conversation keeps circling. The same resistance keeps returning. The same pattern keeps repeating. And eventually, your desire to help can become pressure. Without realizing it, you stop offering. You start persuading, then convincing, then pushing. You begin placing your awareness onto someone who did not ask to carry it. You begin treating your clarity like their obligation. But truth cannot always be transferred at the speed of explanation. Some things cannot be downloaded into another person. Some things have to be lived. Some things have to be encountered. Some lessons arrive only after the old way stops working. Some truths cannot be accepted until the cost of avoiding them becomes greater than the fear of changing. You cannot force someone to see what their nervous system, their identity, their relationships, or their survival strategies are still organized to keep hidden. Because sometimes what looks like denial is protection. Sometimes what looks like stubbornness is fear. Sometimes what looks like resistance is simply a person not yet ready to rearrange the life their current beliefs have built. That does not mean you never speak. Truth still deserves a voice. It means speaking is not the same thing as making someone understand. Understanding cannot be forced. Awareness cannot be borrowed. Conviction cannot be manufactured. Your responsibility may simply be to offer the truth cleanly, without manipulation, without humiliation, without superiority, without needing agreement to validate what you have seen. Then allow the other person to decide what they do with it. They may reject it. They may resist it. They may return to it years later. That part belongs to them. Because once your need for them to understand becomes stronger than your respect for their agency, help turns into control. Even when your intentions were good. Soft strength knows the difference. It speaks honestly. It lives consistently. It leaves room for another person to arrive at their own recognition. Because awareness is never strengthened by coercion. It grows when truth is offered, and freedom is still allowed to answer. There is a difference between stewardship and ownership. At first, they can look almost identical. Both care, both notice, both want what is good, both are willing to act. But beneath the surface, they move from very different places. Ownership says, this is mine to control. This outcome belongs to me. If this doesn't change, I have failed. Stewardship says, this has been placed within my awareness. How do I carry it well? How do I move with integrity, regardless of what another person chooses? Ownership wants power over the outcome. It keeps reaching for certainty, for guarantees, for the ability to make life unfold the way it believes it should. Stewardship accepts responsibility for the movement without claiming control over every result. It understands that responsibility and control are not the same thing. You may see that someone you love is making a harmful choice. You may recognize where that path is leading. Your awareness may be completely accurate. Stewardship may ask you to speak honestly, set a boundary, offer support, refuse participation, or step away. Each of those can be loving movements, depending on the moment. But ownership says you must make them change, that their outcome is now your responsibility, that if they fail, you failed, that if they remain confused, you did not explain well enough, that if they become angry, you must repair their discomfort, that if they walk away, you somehow caused it. Little by little, ownership convinces you that another person's choices are evidence of your worth. That is a weight no human being was meant to carry. Stewardship does not ask that of you. It asks different questions. Did you move honestly? Did you speak clearly? Did you avoid malice? Did you respect their humanity? Did you protect what needed protection? Did you leave room for their own responsibility? Did you remain aligned with the person you are trying to become? That is what belongs to you. The result may not, because every person still has their own movement, their own agency, their own responsibility, their own choices to make. You cannot live someone else's life without slowly abandoning your own. This is one of the hardest lessons for people who care deeply. Love wants to help. Love wants to protect. Love wants to lessen pain. Those are beautiful desires. But love without discernment can become ownership. It begins carrying what it was never assigned to carry. It begins measuring itself by outcomes it could never control. And ownership eventually turns another person's life into your private burden. Stewardship does something quieter. It offers truth. It offers presence. It offers courage. It offers love. Then it trusts that every person must eventually decide what they will do with what has been given. That is not giving up. That is honoring the dignity of another human being. Because sometimes the most loving movement is not taking over someone else's journey. It is walking faithfully through your own. Seeing clearly does not mean reacting to everything you see. It means becoming more precise about your movement. Awareness is not urgency. Recognition is not always an immediate instruction. Sometimes the first responsibility is not action, it is calibration. Before you speak, pause. What is actually needed here? Not what would make you feel useful, not what would prove you are right, not what would release your discomfort fastest, not what would help you feel in control. What is needed? Does this person need information? Or do they already know? Do they need help? Or do they need the dignity of making their own decision? Does the room need your voice? Or would your silence allow the truth to reveal itself naturally? Does this moment require a boundary, a question, a warning, a witness, a departure? There is no single correct movement for every situation. The same action can be responsible in one moment and harmful in another. That is why awareness requires calibration. The same truth spoken at the wrong time can become noise. The same silence held too long can become participation. The same kindness offered without limits can become permission. The same boundary delivered through anger can become punishment. The same help given without invitation can become control. Seeing clearly does not hand you a universal script. It gives you the responsibility to listen more carefully before you move. Needed, wanted, welcomed. You may want to correct, but is correction needed? You may want to rescue, but is rescue welcomed? You may want to explain. But is the person asking to understand or only asking to be heard? You may want to remain quiet, but is silence protecting peace or protecting your comfort? You may want to leave, but is departure the cleanest movement or a way to avoid a necessary conversation? Responsible awareness does not only ask, what do I see? It asks, what is mine to do? What belongs to them? What protects dignity? What reduces harm? What keeps my movement aligned with integrity? Sometimes the needed movement is small. One honest sentence, one calm boundary, one question that gives another person room to hear themselves. Sometimes the needed movement is silence, not passive silence, not fearful silence, a silence that refuses to feed distortion. And sometimes the needed movement is to step away, not to punish, not to prove a point, but because remaining would require participation in something you can no longer support. This is where soft strength becomes discernment. It does not move just because it can. It does not speak just because it sees. It listens. It measures. It recognizes that good intentions do not guarantee good movement. Responsible awareness does not only ask, what do I see? It asks, what does this moment actually require from me? And sometimes the most honest answer is less than your impulse wanted. Sometimes it is more. The responsibility is not to move dramatically. It is to move cleanly. There are times when silence is wisdom. Not every truth needs immediate expression. Not every invitation to argue deserves your participation. Sometimes awareness recognizes that speaking would not create clarity. It would only create more noise. You recognize that the other person is not listening. They are waiting for their turn to defend, waiting for an opening to counter, waiting to protect an identity rather than explore what is true. You recognize that the room is not safe for honesty, not because honesty is wrong, because the environment has already decided its conclusion. You recognize that your words would only become material for another argument, another accusation, another misunderstanding. So you remain quiet, not because you are afraid, not because you have lost your voice, because you understand that truth does not become stronger through unnecessary collision. You do not have to place every realization into every room. You do not have to correct every distortion the moment you recognize it. You do not have to prove that you understand what is happening. Awareness does not require constant demonstration. Sometimes the responsibility of seeing clearly is choosing not to feed the spectacle, not responding to the insult, not defending yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you, not chasing the final word, not exposing everything you have noticed just because you can. There is strength in knowing that restraint is also movement. Silence can protect dignity. It can preserve energy. It can keep a conversation from becoming a competition. It can leave room for another person to hear themselves without your voice competing with their conscience. Sometimes your absence from the argument allows reality to speak louder than your explanation ever could. But silence must also be examined, because silence can be wisdom or fear, peace or compliance, restraint or abandonment, protection or avoidance. Sometimes remaining quiet keeps the peace. Sometimes remaining quiet protects the very thing that needed to be challenged. That is why awareness does not measure only the action. It measures the purpose. The question is not simply, did I stay quiet? The question is, what did my silence serve? Did it protect what was good? Did it reduce harm? Did it preserve dignity? Did it create space for truth to emerge naturally? Or did it protect my own comfort while someone else carried the cost? Responsible silence is not passive. It is intentional. It is chosen with the same care as responsible speech. Because sometimes the strongest movement is speaking. Sometimes the strongest movement is walking away. And sometimes the strongest movement is allowing silence to say what words no longer can. There are also moments when silence is not enough, when someone is being harmed, when misinformation is shaping a dangerous choice, when a pattern continues because everyone sees it and nobody names it, when remaining comfortable would require someone else to remain unprotected. In those moments, seeing clearly may ask you to speak, not to perform courage, not to prove that you are fearless, because responsibility has reached the point where silence would no longer be neutral. But speaking responsibly does not mean speaking cruelly. It does not require humiliation. It does not require turning another person into a villain so you can become the hero. It does not require making the truth louder than it needs to be. You can say, this is not okay. You can say, I will not participate in this. You can say, that is not what happened. You can say, I care about you, but I cannot support this choice. You can name the pattern without attacking the person's humanity. You can set the boundary without trying to wound them. You can protect someone without making yourself the center of the moment. You can tell the truth without placing poison inside it. That is soft strength, a living heart, a clear boundary, a steady voice, not a voice without emotion, a voice that has not surrendered its integrity to the emotion. Because sometimes anger is present, fear is present, grief is present, the body knows something is wrong, the heart knows someone may be harmed, the mind understands that something must be named. Alignment does not require pretending those feelings do not exist. It asks whether those feelings will guide the movement or control it. The responsibility is not only to speak truth, it is to examine what you place beside it. Contempt, revenge, superiority, the need to punish, or integrity, clarity, protection, a sincere desire to reduce harm. Because truth spoken through malice may still contain facts, but the movement itself creates more distortion. The words may be accurate, while the delivery becomes another wound. The boundary may be necessary, while the punishment hidden inside it makes the purpose unclear. The warning may be justified, while humiliation turns protection into spectacle. That is why responsible speech requires more than being correct. It requires calibration. What is needed? What is the clearest sentence? Who needs protection? What must be named? What can be left out because it only serves my anger? Sometimes responsible speech is public. Sometimes it is private. Sometimes it is one sentence. Sometimes it is a direct refusal. Sometimes it is a witness saying calmly, I saw what happened. The measure is not how powerful the speech sounded. The measure is what the movement served. Did it protect dignity? Did it interrupt harm? Did it make truth more visible? Did it remain firm without becoming cruel? That is soft strength. Not silence for the sake of comfort. Not aggression for the sake of control. A steady voice carrying a clear truth without surrendering the heart that made the truth worth speaking. Awareness without compassion becomes criticism. It becomes very good at finding error, very quick to identify failure, very skilled at pointing toward what is broken. You see every flaw, every inconsistency, every weakness. every contradiction between what people say and how they move. You become excellent at identifying what is wrong, but incapable of understanding why it formed. Eventually, everyone begins looking like a problem to solve instead of a person to understand. Compassion does not excuse harm. It does not pretend that damaging behavior is suddenly acceptable. It does something quieter. It gives the pattern context. It asks, what happened that made this movement make sense to them? Maybe that person controls because uncertainty once felt dangerous. Maybe they lie because truth once cost them belonging. Maybe they attack first because vulnerability once invited injury. Maybe they withdraw because closeness once became pain. Maybe they keep taking because they still believe nothing will ever be enough. Maybe they keep performing because they learned their value depended upon being useful. Understanding the origin does not mean accepting the behavior. It does not remove responsibility. It simply allows you to respond to the whole person instead of only the symptom. Clarity says, this movement is harmful. Compassion says, this person is more than the harmful movement. Boundary says, I will not allow it to continue through me. Those three can exist together. You do not have to sacrifice one to keep the others. You do not have to choose between seeing clearly and loving people. You do not have to become blind to remain kind. And you do not have to become cruel to remain honest. In fact, the deeper your awareness becomes, the more carefully it should handle another person's story. Because none of us can see every chapter. We see moments, we see patterns, we see consequences. But we rarely see every wound, every fear, every lesson, every survival strategy that shaped the person standing in front of us. That does not mean we ignore what is harmful. It means we refuse to reduce a human being to a single behavior. We protect what needs protecting. We confront what needs confronting. We set the necessary boundary. But we remember that dignity belongs to every person, even when their movement must be challenged. That balance is the heart of soft strength. A clear mind, a living heart, a steady body, seeing the pattern, protecting the boundary, and never forgetting that every human being is still more than the worst thing they have ever done. There will always be more pain than one person can hold, more problems than one person can solve, more distortion than one voice can correct, more rooms than one heart can remain responsible for. If you begin treating awareness like a call to carry everything, awareness will eventually become resentment. What began as care will begin feeling like obligation. What began as compassion will begin feeling like exhaustion. You will become tired of noticing, tired of caring, tired of being the one who always understands, tired of watching people repeat the same patterns, tired of seeing what no one else seems willing to name. And because the burden was never sustainable, you may begin hardening. You may say, nobody listens, people never change, why should I care? But maybe the problem was not compassion. Maybe the problem was the belief that compassion required you to carry every room, that seeing pain made all pain your responsibility, that recognizing distortion meant you had to correct it wherever it appeared, that being aware meant being endlessly available. It does not. You are allowed to have a radius, a place where your responsibility is real and your movement can remain grounded, your family, your work, your friendships, your community, the person standing directly in front of you, the choice currently in your hands. A radius does not mean you stop caring about what exists beyond it. It means you stop pretending you can hold everything without losing yourself. You do not have to solve humanity to move humanely. You do not have to save the world to stop creating harm inside your part of it. Responsible awareness begins close. In your tone, your choices, your spending, your relationships, your willingness to speak or remain silent, your refusal to pass distortion forward. It begins in how you use power inside the spaces you actually touch, how you treat the tired person in front of you, how you respond when frustration enters your body, how you carry truth when nobody will applaud you, how you interrupt the harm that would otherwise move through you into someone else. That may feel small, but every environment is built from repeated movement, every family pattern, every workplace culture, every community, every system. All of it is sustained by what people repeatedly allow, repeat, reward, or refuse. You may not be able to change every room, but you can become responsible for the movement you bring into yours. You can choose not to add another layer of harm. You can choose not to hand your unresolved fear to the next person. You can choose not to make someone else carry the weight you refuse to examine. That is not small. That is how environments change. Not everywhere at once, but close enough for your movement to become real. Responsible awareness does not ask you to carry the world. It asks you to stop abandoning the part of the world your life is already touching. Seeing clearly may place you in a form of leadership, even if nobody calls you a leader. Even if you have no title, no platform, no position, no authority. Leadership does not begin with influence. It begins with movement. It begins the moment your choices create conditions other people can trust. You become the person who does not panic when the room becomes tense, the person who tells the truth without cruelty, the person who does not need to dominate the conversation just to feel heard, the person who can admit uncertainty without pretending certainty, the person whose values remain present when convenience disappears, the person who apologizes when they are wrong, who keeps their word when no one is checking, who treats the least powerful person with the same dignity as the most influential. That is leadership, not because people are following you, because your movement has become dependable. People begin learning what safety feels like simply by watching how you carry yourself. They begin learning what honesty sounds like because you refuse to distort reality for comfort. They begin learning what boundaries look like because yours are firm without becoming hostile. They begin learning that strength does not have to become intimidation, that conviction does not require contempt, that clarity does not demand control. That is leadership without needing followers. You are not asking people to become copies of you. You are not asking them to borrow your identity. You are showing what alignment looks like inside your own life. Mind, heart, body, saying the same thing, not perfectly, but consistently enough that people know what they will find when they encounter you. And people may notice, not because you demanded attention, not because you announced your wisdom, not because you won every argument, because coherence has weight, integrity has a sound. Responsible movement creates a signal. Some people will recognize it immediately. Some will misunderstand it. Some will resist it. Some will quietly return months or years later, remembering how you moved when everyone else was reacting. That part is not yours to control. Your responsibility is not to decide who hears. It is not to manufacture agreement. It is not to gather followers. It is to keep the signal as clean as you can, to let your words match your movement, to let your movement match your values, to let your values continue producing good fruit. Because leadership is not measured by how many people walk behind you. It is measured by whether the space you leave behind contains more honesty, more dignity, more courage, and more peace than when you first walked into it. There is another danger inside awareness. You can begin building your entire identity around being the one who sees, the one who knows, the one who notices, the one everyone comes to when the room becomes confusing. At first, it feels meaningful. You are useful, needed, trusted. People ask for your perspective. They rely on your judgment. They look to you for language when they cannot explain what they are feeling. And being useful can feel like purpose. But eventually, you may become dependent on other people remaining confused so you can remain the clear one. Their uncertainty keeps your role intact. Their dependence confirms your importance. Their struggle gives your identity something to hold. And without realizing it, you may begin resenting their growth, interrupting their discovery, answering questions they need to sit with, explaining lessons they are finally ready to learn for themselves. You may start stepping in too quickly, not because they need you, because you need to still be needed. You may unknowingly keep people in the role of needing you. You may solve what they were capable of facing, speak for them when they were ready to find their own voice, carry what they needed to learn how to hold. That is not stewardship. That is identity protecting itself. Because real stewardship does not ask, how do I remain important here? It asks, what helps this person become more responsible for their own movement? Sometimes that means speaking, sometimes guiding, sometimes offering support, and sometimes it means stepping back. The responsibility of seeing clearly includes knowing when not to remain at the center, when to let someone else lead, when to admit, I may be wrong, when to allow another perspective to challenge yours, when to allow another person to discover something without placing your name on it. That can be difficult when being the clear one has become part of how you understand yourself, because stepping back can feel like disappearing. But you are not disappearing. You are making room. room for another person to trust their own awareness, room for them to make mistakes, room for them to become capable, room for the movement to continue without depending on your presence. Real clarity does not need to remain central. It does not need credit. It does not need to be quoted. It does not need everyone to remember who first saw the pattern. It wants the movement to become healthier, even if nobody remembers who first pointed toward it. Because the purpose was never to become indispensable. The purpose was to help create conditions where people could stand more honestly inside their own lives. And sometimes, the clearest evidence that your guidance was responsible is that eventually they no longer need you to guide them. It is easier to carry awareness outward, to see what everyone else needs to change, what the family refuses to address, what the workplace keeps ignoring, what society gets wrong, what leaders fail to understand, what everyone else should have done differently. Outward awareness comes naturally. It asks, what are they doing? What are they missing? What should they change? Those are important questions. But they are not the first questions. The first responsibility of seeing clearly is inward. What are you doing with what you know? Where are you still participating in the pattern you criticize? Where do your values disappear when keeping them becomes expensive? Where do you use awareness to explain yourself instead of changing yourself? Where do you ask others for honesty while protecting your own omissions? Where do you expect patience without extending it? Where do you ask for understanding while refusing to understand someone else? Those questions are rarely comfortable, but they are honest. Because awareness becomes dangerous when it is always looking through the window and never into the mirror. Awareness that only travels outward becomes accusation. It becomes excellent at naming everyone else's distortions, everyone else's failures, everyone else's inconsistencies, while quietly protecting its own. Awareness that can return inward becomes transformation. Not because it is perfect, because it remains teachable, because it continues asking, what still needs to change in me? That does not mean blaming yourself for everything. It does not mean accepting responsibility for what belongs to someone else. It means refusing to use clarity as a way of escaping your own responsibility. It means allowing the same honesty you hope to receive from others to become the standard you first apply to yourself. You may not control the system, but you control what you contribute to it. You may not control another person's behavior, but you control whether you continue feeding it. You may not control what happened. You may not control how someone else chooses to move, but you have growing influence over what you carry forward. Every conversation, every boundary, every decision, every moment you choose whether distortion ends with you or passes through you into someone else. That is where responsibility becomes real. Not when you finally understand the whole world, but when the understanding you already have begins shaping your own movement. Because the clearest evidence that awareness is becoming wisdom is not how accurately you describe other people's lives. It is how consistently you allow what you have seen to transform your own. Awareness is not a trophy. It is not proof that you are more evolved. It is not a badge to wear, not an identity to defend, not a private tower from which you judge everyone still walking below. Awareness is information, and information creates choice. Before you recognize the pattern, your movement may have been automatic. You reacted because that was the only movement you knew. You repeated what had always been repeated. You inherited without examining. You participated without recognizing what you were helping continue. After you recognize it, another option appears. There is now a moment between the stimulus and your response, a space where intention can enter, a space where responsibility can grow. That is what awareness is for, not to make you superior, to make your movement less unconscious, more deliberate, more honest, more aligned, not because you suddenly became a different person, because you finally became more present inside the person you were already becoming. You may still make mistakes. You may still react. You may still misunderstand. You may still discover months later that something you were certain about needed correction. Seeing clearly does not make you perfect. It makes you more responsible for what you do next. That is the difference. Responsibility is not perfection. It is responsiveness, the willingness to let new understanding shape new movement. And maybe maturity is not becoming someone who always knows the correct movement. Maybe it is becoming someone willing to pause, listen, measure, move. And then honestly examine what that movement produced. Not defending it, not excusing it, not protecting your image, examining it. Did it create more clarity, more fear, more dignity, more dependence, more peace, more harm? Did it reduce distortion or quietly add to it? Did it leave the environment healthier than you found it? The fruit teaches, not as punishment, as information. The fruit reveals what the movement actually created. Then awareness adjusts, the mind learns, the heart receives, the body moves again, a little cleaner, a little wiser, a little more aligned. That is movement, not perfection, a life that remains teachable, a life that keeps returning to honesty, a life that understands the purpose of awareness was never to arrive above others. It was to become more responsible with every step you choose to take. The responsibility of seeing clearly is often quieter than we imagine. We tend to picture responsibility as something dramatic, a speech, a confrontation, a public stand, a moment everyone remembers. Sometimes those moments come. Sometimes they are necessary. But most of life is not lived inside dramatic moments. Most of life is built through ordinary choices that quietly shape the environment around us. Sometimes responsibility looks like paying attention, checking the receipt, asking one more question, reading one more paragraph before repeating what everyone else is saying, refusing to laugh when the joke requires someone else's humiliation, giving credit to the person whose work was ignored, telling someone privately what they needed to know, choosing not to profit from another person's confusion, returning what was not yours, keeping your word when breaking it would be easier, treating the worker with the same dignity you give the person who signs your paycheck, calling someone when your awareness tells you they may not be okay, looking someone in the eyes when everyone else walks past them, leaving a place better than you found it. None of those movements are likely to become headlines. Most people will never know they happened, and yet they shape the kind of person you become, because awareness is not only tested during extraordinary moments, it is tested inside ordinary ones, when no one is keeping score, when there is no reward, when integrity is the only witness. The world often celebrates large movements, the grand gesture, the public declaration, the visible victory. But integrity is usually built through small decisions repeated consistently. One honest conversation, one fair transaction, one unnecessary kindness, one temptation quietly refused, one opportunity to exploit someone left untouched, again and again and again. Over time, those ordinary movements become your character. They become the rhythm of your life. They become the signal other people experience before they ever hear your words. That is where awareness becomes trustworthy. Not in what you can recognize, not in how much you understand, not in how accurately you explain reality, in what you do with what you recognize. Because awareness that never becomes movement remains potential. But awareness expressed through consistent, ordinary integrity becomes something other people can safely build their trust upon. Take a breath. Think about something you can see clearly now that you could not see a year ago. A relationship, a habit, a pattern, a belief, a part of yourself. What has that clarity been asking of you? Not what has it been asking everyone else to do. What has it been asking from you? Have you been trying to control an outcome that does not belong to you? Have you been carrying a room that was never yours to hold alone? Have you been speaking when listening was needed, or remaining silent when integrity asked for your voice? Where has awareness become superiority? Where has compassion become ownership? Where has protection become avoidance? And what would responsible movement look like now? One clean action, one honest boundary, one conversation, one release, one choice not to repeat what you can finally see. If you notice things other people do not seem to notice, you are not automatically responsible for making everyone see them. Your awareness does not become their obligation. Your clarity does not give you ownership over their timing. You may speak, you may offer, you may warn, you may step back. But you do not have to force another person into recognition. If you feel the tension inside a room, you do not have to become the room's nervous system. You do not have to regulate every reaction. Soften every conflict, explain every silence, carry every discomfort. You can remain aware without becoming absorbed. You can feel what is happening without letting the whole room move into your body. If you understand why someone is hurting, you do not have to accept the harm they create. Compassion does not erase consequence. Understanding does not remove responsibility. You can see the wound beneath the behavior and still refuse to let that behavior continue through you. If you love someone, you do not have to own their outcome. You can care deeply without making their choices the measure of your worth. You can offer support without taking control. You can tell the truth without trying to force the result. You can care without carrying, speak without controlling, listen without disappearing, protect without hardening, lead without needing followers. You can remain soft without becoming available to harm. You can remain honest without becoming cruel. You can remain present without becoming responsible for everything that happens around you. Maybe awareness was never given to you so you could stand above people. Maybe it was given so you could move among them with greater care, with more precision, more humility, more discernment. Maybe seeing clearly is not the finish line. Maybe it is the moment choice becomes visible, the moment your movement can no longer remain completely unconscious. And responsibility begins. Not responsibility for every person, every room, every outcome. Not responsibility to rescue everyone from every consequence. Responsibility for the signal moving through you, for the words you place into the world, for the silence you choose to keep, for the boundaries you create, for the power you carry, for the harm you refuse to continue, for the truth you are willing to live, for whether your movement creates more fear or more dignity, more dependence or more agency, more distortion or more clarity. You will not always choose perfectly. You will not always know the cleanest movement in the moment, but awareness allows you to pause, to listen, to measure, to move, and then to examine the fruit. That is stewardship, not control, not superiority, not the burden of carrying everyone. Stewardship of what has entered your awareness, stewardship of what your mind recognizes, what your heart carries, what your body places into motion. That is soft strength, a living heart with clear boundaries, a steady voice that does not need to dominate, a responsible movement that does not need to be applauded. That is awareness becoming choice, choice becoming integrity, integrity becoming movement, and movement becoming something the world around you can trust. Take a breath. If today's conversation helped put words to something you have been carrying, thank you for spending this time with us. Dedicated to those who see what others may not see, who feel the weight inside rooms, and who are learning that awareness does not require them to carry everyone. Dedicated to those learning to speak without controlling, to care without disappearing, and to live what they know without standing above those still discovering it. If you're enjoying the journey, share this episode with someone who may need it. Subscribe wherever you're listening, and stay with us each week. And join us on Facebook. Not for noise, not for attention, just a place where people learning to grow do not have to do it alone. Next week, we continue inside Frequency 5, because seeing clearly can help you move with greater responsibility. But clarity can also expose you to disappointment, to repetition, to the exhaustion of watching people choose what you can already see will hurt them. And if you are not careful, awareness can become cynicism. Discernment can become suspicion. Protection can become hardness. Next week, we talk about how to keep moving without allowing the world to turn your clarity to a closed heart. Episode 26, How to Move Without Hardening. Every day is awesome. We just have to get through it. I'll see you in episode 26.